I know women and men have always been at each other's throats to some degree, but I think it's gotten worse over just the last year. Thoughts? It's interesting and disappointing at the same time. Story 1. I got back into reading lately, and while I'm not selling reading as the be-all cure, it keeps me off social media, and my mind feels a lot better from not consuming so much extremist content online. Story 2. Honestly, I feel it really is TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. The algorithm is too good. If you like something, you end up down a pipeline into extremist media from both sides. I really like funny memes, but unfortunately, so do many right-wing conspiracy followers and alpha men. You watch a few funny memes, and suddenly you're listening to a podcast snippet about how stupid women are. Talking to my girlfriend, she gets the other end. She watches cute cat videos, pottery stuff, what I eat in a day, etc. And suddenly it's why your relationship is bad and you need to break up. A lot of professionals talking about mental health and how to self-diagnose. You and I could be on the same app and see completely opposite ends of the political spectrum. On one hand, you have a bunch of misogynists giving you tips on relationships until you become single, and on the other, you have misandrists teaching you why you should end your relationship at the first sign of trouble. You can see how they feed into each other and reinforce the perceptions each gender has on the other. Story 3. Hard to tell, really. There are true tensions and friction between sexes. But aside from some cultures, the transition to a society without as much of a gender advantage is moving uninterrupted. I would therefore blame trends and fads. People tend to create beliefs and start acting in a particular way without easy explanation. Technology companies' algorithms seem to love confrontations. The most radical to the allowed level's voice is amplified the most. Technology prevents people from civil discussion with the other side. Information bubbles are fortified, armed, and without any door. Story 4. The rhetoric is pushing moderate voices and ideas to the sidelines. From the male side, the negative rhetoric is that women are all cheating individuals who will use you for your money and leave when you have nothing to offer. From the female side, the rhetoric is that all men are manipulative, violent, abusive individuals who only want women for sex. Unfortunately, both sides amplify the worst rhetoric from the other side. This has a lot to do with social media algorithms promoting divisive content more because it generates more interactions and clicks. So for a moderate woman, when they go online and see posts from men, they are more likely to be shown the most sexist and bigoted male opinions and vice versa for men. People with rational and constructive thoughts don't get as much visibility. So generally, everybody is being fed the worst ideas. If you have a side in the battle, you end up being pushed to hate the other side more and more. Story 5. There are many reasons. One major reason, which I don't see discussed much, is what I call moral authoritarians. These are people who believe there are only two ways to view an issue: the correct way and the wrong way. They become upset if you don't completely agree with them on every issue and assume that if you disagree on one thing, you must have the most extreme wrong ideas possible. These people, in their moral crusades, cause massive division and encourage others to take extreme positions. Story 6. The more you engage with a given issue online, the more prominent it will seem to you. I agree with what you are saying, but I understand it's not entirely real. Most internet algorithms keep you in a loop, making it seem like a given topic is constant to the point that you cannot understand how everyone is not thinking about what you are. If you start following lawn care in 2 months, you will think everyone is absolutely obsessed with their lawns. It's all about what you click on. Story 7. People talk about social media, but I believe that is just a tool. The real reasons are something else. It might be capitalism and an oversupply of labor. No one has time or energy for kids because they're all too busy working, or that men can't get women because the minimum standards like house, car, and income are very high. It might be the breakdown of education. Parents can't really teach their kids now because they're all working. This results in people being just ignorant on how to attract and keep the other gender, which just results in lots of frustration. I don't really have an answer, but I think it's weird that only now did men start becoming violent and lazy, or that women started being super picky about who they go out with. Story 8. Divide and conquer by those in power keeps us distracted from what is happening in the economy with wealth transfer and theft by elites. Look at which companies post those articles. Story 9. Misogyny fuels misandry, and misandry fuels misogyny. The internet makes spreading both easier. Politics creates a warped understanding of gender equality as solely the interests of women. This leads to backlash and brings conservatives who do not fix the problem but take away useful things like reproductive rights. Nowadays, women and men do not need each other for survival. Family is optional. People also see horrible examples of families from previous generations. They do not settle or communicate with the opposite gender, and this allows hatred to breed much better when you know the opposite gender only through social media, not as friends or partners. Story 10. There are many hidden expectations from both sides due to social media and how the algorithms work. Both sides receive advice from other people in similar situations, but not every situation is the same, so often this advice is not very helpful. Additionally, there is a lot of the mentality that if they wanted to, they would, which shows how little healthy communication skills are valued. Story 11. Election cycle. Division is most important right now. Expect to see it from every angle with growing intensity until December. Then it should taper off for a while again. Story 12. There are a lot of reasons, but in my opinion, that's a big one. Men and women used to unite in the common goal of building a family together. When that started going away, things started falling apart. Losing shared interests didn't create this animosity, but maybe it was keeping a lid on it. Story 13. It's election season. Time for maximum divide and conquer. Bread and circuses. Keep everyone thinking this group or that group is your enemy, and they will fight each other while the puppet masters do as they please. Jones Plantation, available to rent on Amazon Prime, is a good dramatization of what democracy really is. Story 14. Same as the racial tension and politics becoming totally us versus them. Those at the top of the socioeconomic ladder who own all the media platforms just love keeping us at each other's throats while they rob us blind, I guess. Story 15. A lot of creators realized that rage bait was a moneymaker. It's now everywhere, and that content is mostly some sort of gender-related theme. This seems to be increasing the divide. I wish it would disappear. There's enough going on in the world that fake or scripted videos are not needed. Story 16. It's to keep us distracted and disconnected. I saw a viral video of a woman who said, "When I scream at my kids all day, it's okay. But when the dad raises his voice once, it's war." The comments were all supportive, but no one asked why you were screaming at your kids all day. The bigger picture always gets the little views. Another example. Working in an office, on a call with a customer, a woman places her breasts on my head during the call. The whole office bursts into laughter. Now, let's consider that scenario if a male rested his genitals on a female's head. The truth is we are all the same. This purposeful division, I believe. Story 17. TikTok is a cesspit for this type of stuff, especially recently with alone with a beer or a man content. TikTok promoted it heavily in the algorithm. It's solely designed as rage bait and to divide men and women. I really don't understand how people interacting with it don't see the obvious bait. That definitely explains why recently it feels like it's become more heated and popular to hate on men and women. Story 18. I think the elites are trying to break down the family home, pitting husbands and wives against each other because if separated, they both have to rely on jobs, corporations, and government assistance for help, increasing their power. Story 19. My wildest, most fringe theory first. Psychological operations. Shadowy governments and influential groups using social movements, media, and technology to create division between people with the ultimate goal of reducing Earth's human population, whether by encouraging violence or by preventing reproduction. General disillusionment as well. People seem less interested in educating themselves and utilizing critical thinking skills than I remember 30 years ago. Instead of respectfully disagreeing and having a discussion, it's easy enough to just find someone more agreeable. With certain elements of our social climate, it's easy enough for some women to just go gay if they've had bad experiences with men, or just leave their partner instead of working things out. The modern short attention span lends itself to seeking the quick and easy answer. Post-pandemic shifts in behavior. On average, most people were either more or less sexually active than usual during the height of the pandemic. That is, most people's sexual and dating habits changed. Now we're in a readjustment period, and coming out of both the pandemic and the Me Too era is a new challenge to navigate. We don't know how to interact across the sex and gender gap anymore. Dating apps are killing real intimacy and natural connection. No offense to anyone who met their partner on a dating app. I'm happy for you, but for every success story there's someone getting stood up for a date arranged by a deceitful restaurant owner posing as a Tinder profile. Generally, electronically mediated communication has been dehumanizing the ways we interact with each other. It's easy to be a troll online with no consequences. It's also easy to become jaded. It's easy to find an echo chamber. It's easy to forget there is a real human being on the other side of an interaction. I think spending so much time staring at our little screens is making us all more self-centered and less able to connect and relate to each other. The exception, in my experience, has been well-moderated communities such as this one and others on forums like Reddit, as well as some old-fashioned bulletin board code forums with a genuine sense of community. But it's easy to get into an us versus them in-group/out-group mindset on the internet, and I genuinely feel that the impact of this is carrying over into real life. Ignorance combined with information overload. Women don't know how to understand men's feelings and vice versa. We have less effective intrinsic communication tools and more computers that do half the thinking for us. We fail to communicate and instead become frustrated with each other, and no one wants to take responsibility for their own part in the mass misunderstanding. People ask here about what women think and feel and ask in women-specific forums about what makes men tick. We have so many places to go for information that we aren't getting it from the original source. Simply talking to each other. Story 20: mental illness has been reaffirmed. So now every mentally disturbed person thinks their voice should shape the world. We are in a major social regression right now. Literal insanity is being glorified and reinforced these days. Story 21. The billionaire class on both sides profits by getting people riled up against each other. Women versus men, transgender issues on both sides. This drives engagement on social media platforms, consumption of goods and services, and distracts from the fact that we have a ruling class that has yachts, private aircraft, and dozens of houses. It makes them money and keeps them in power. Story 22. This year, it's just ramping up as part of the United States election drama. More generally, it seems to be about the non-existent or contradicting rules, moral guidelines, expectations, goals, and outcomes of modern dating. Story 23. I do think online content puts an unhealthy focus on issues and makes them out to be larger than they are. That said, all that inflammatory content, in my opinion, does a good job of uncovering the unflattering truths about men and women. It's just that currently it's in focus, which is somewhat unhealthy. People are cool, but they're also animals, all of us. Story 24. I think people are lonelier than ever, and instead of working out their own problems, they find it easier to blame outside forces and someone else other than themselves. Story 25. Election season in the United States doesn't help. People are drawing lines and dividing themselves however they can, and there's always opportunists out there to make the most of it. Story 26. Literally depends on what kind of social media you consume. I started blocking all of the YouTube creators that are obsessed with it, and I barely see anything about it these days. Story 27. Divide and conquer. Black versus white versus Latino. Male versus female. Rural versus urban. Anything to keep us from uniting and demanding a fair share. That is how 10% maintain 90% of the wealth. Then use it to buy off our politicians and do whatever they want. Story 28. I've been saying for a few years now that social media is doing more harm than good, with people who are unhinged having a platform to speak loudly. There is so much hate being spread with misinformation and disinformation, and these apps and sites are not properly moderated. I've had many comments removed on TikTok that really weren't harmful, yet in that same comment section, I've seen hate speech and bullying being left up. In person, most people tend to wear a mask, but online the masks come off and people show their true colors with the garbage they type out, which always leads to arguments and fights. In this case, people are tired of being mistreated due to their gender, so they're speaking up and lashing out over social media, which creates backlash from those who find their words insulting. When this dies down, something else will start the vicious cycle again. Story 29. The algorithms of social media platforms are designed for clickbait, creating feedback loops and echo chambers. They create an amplified and distorted perception of the world, and most people feel daring when hiding behind a keyboard. Story 30. Lots of comments dismissing this as an online-only problem. That's really short-sighted given that it was less than 8 years ago that the then chronically online alt-right gave us a meme president and a whole mountain of real-world problems as a result. Those are real people pushing this on social media. Even if most of them are grifters pushing rage bait for clicks, their audiences believe them. Hell, repeat the same lie enough and almost anyone will start to believe it, including the ones pushing the lies themselves.